episode 141 of the podcast. Is old school thinking making your job harder? Could you be holding on to outdated information without even knowing it? How can you open yourself to learning new material and maybe letting go of some of the old material? Find out this week. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. I want to talk about this idea of being old school. It comes up an awful lot, and it comes up in a variety of ways. As groomers, when I'm wearing my groomer hat, because there are lots of fields and lots of ways that we become old school, but as a groomer, when I'm wearing my groomer hat, it comes up in the way that we handle animals, along with products that we use. But let's talk about the animal handling part specifically, because that's what this podcast is about. It comes up pretty often, the way that we handle animals, because many groomers are fairly new to grooming, but have been taught by someone who calls it old school. So why do we put any emphasis on being old school? What exactly does it even mean? And I think it comes from this idea that the way we used to do it, as if there's like a tradition that we must keep up. Where I do it this way because I was taught this way and it was good enough for so-and-so and now it's good enough for me. I want us to be able to challenge some of these old school thoughts, because it's important for us to continue to learn and grow. Learning and growing is really important. And this is a way that people make a living. Now, as an owner, if you're an owner and you're here listening to the podcast because your dog is having some trouble with being handled, you still have to worry about these old school thoughts too. Because if so many cases, the old school version of animal handling falls short. It's not necessarily the best way of doing things. Oh no, there I go, I said it. And that's a strong opinion, but it's an opinion based on a long time working with dogs. So I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about some of my background, because I usually don't, because it kind of comes off as like, I don't know, storytelling just about me. But my first job working at a boarding kennel with other people's dogs in 1986. I was learning how to bathe dogs. I was learning how to do nails. I was there as a kennel attendant. So I was back in the day. Oh gosh, here we come. Back in the day when every single dog through April through, I think, October got a once-a-day heartworm pill. Our policy where I worked was open their mouth and push a pill down their throat. So I got pretty good education on dogs right from the beginning. But while I was there learning how to bathe dogs, learning how to do nails, I was learning old school handling techniques, which was a lot of get it done despite a problem. So if a dog is having a behavior problem, we were just pushing them through it. We were just getting it done. And also this idea that the dog will eventually figure out that it doesn't hurt, so everything's going to be fine. Or some dogs are just bad dogs. I know. Like, that's not how we think about it now. Not usually. But that was kind of the old school version. Now, I know there are groomers who've been grooming a lot longer than I have. But I gotta say, I think 1986, that's far enough back for me to say I was definitely taught old school. And so when I look at behavior, it's been this ongoing love affair with behavior and grooming, because I love both. But I have changed the way I do things multiple times, over and over and over again. And change isn't easy, and I don't just hop on to any new fad. But for me to change, I really need to see that this works better. This is a technique that I like better, or I have a new tool that might work better on some dogs, but not on others. But I want you to think about it as expanding a toolkit. So there are things that we buy to make our lives easier. It might be a faster pair of clippers. It might be a wider blade. It might be a stronger dryer. We come up with ways to save ourselves time, to save ourselves effort, and learning about animal behavior and learning about how these animals learn And knowing that there's a group of people out there who try to help animals be good for grooming, just knowing that it exists can really help us in our day-to-day lives. So if it's an owner who's listening to this podcast right now, yeah, trying something new from somebody else might work. It might work for your dog. But I feel like this idea of old school, as if it's like traditional for us to do it this particular way. Now, I mentioned I'm going to talk a little bit about myself because, well, I feel I've been doing this long enough to have been taught old school. But also, I'm going to mention here, on a personal level, I do Middle Ages and historical reenactments. I can easily spend an entire day hand sewing because I like to hand sew. Like, I'm about tradition. I like traditional crafts. I can spend all day doing stuff like that. However, not when it comes to the way I make my living. Unless someone's going to pay me for hand-sewn clothing, which no one's ever really, think about it, those of us who knit or make crafts, no one is ever going to pay the kind of time that we put into crafts like that. It's pretty rare. When I'm at work, I need to get my job done. And I want to be efficient. And that's not about throwing all traditions out and going with the latest fad, but that is about being aware of what things are going to make my job easier. So let's talk about some of the old school versions of dog grooming and the handling that I see, because it means different things to different people. And one of the things that I see pretty often is continuing to groom a dog while it struggles is often old school. And I consider that old school too. I can't believe that that's still being taught. Like, well, he's really struggling. Let's add a strap, let's figure out how we can get that little piece while he flails around. That's kind of old school handling. Here's another one. To work on the assumption that the dog will eventually figure out that grooming doesn't hurt. That's kind of an old school. That assumption isn't really true. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know that that's not the way I teach it, because often that is the exact thing that got us into this problem to begin with. The dog needed a little bit of space, needed some reassurance, was indicating that it was really afraid, and we just held him down, held him still, and powered through it. And that's old school. And it's not particularly good for us to do. Not just for the dog, but for us as an industry. Those of us who don't want to burn out on our careers and don't want to work with dogs who hate it. Now here's another one. To work on the assumption that some dogs are just jerks. That's another version of old school, that old school mindset. Like a good dog would know better. A good dog would never try to bite you. But dogs can panic. Dogs can become very afraid of the things that we're doing. And dogs can learn to fight back. And dogs can learn that we're relentless, especially if we're using some of these old school mindsets of just hold him down and get it done. He'll eventually figure out that this doesn't hurt. Stress isn't about if something hurts. People stress about things that never hurt them. Plenty of things can cause you stress or fear or anxiety that don't cause you physical harm. So we need to get away from this mindset that dogs are kind of dumb, because they're pretty smart. They can figure these things out. And so when you get away from that mindset, start thinking about how much time you're spending teaching the dogs to like it, to be good for it, to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. Because the long-term goal is for a dog to feel like this is okay. And we can do our best work on a dog who happens to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. And later in life, when their health starts to fail them, we're not going to try to tell owners, oh, it's time for him to go to the vet to be sedated for grooming, because he's always hated it, but now he's just really becoming too much for me to be able to get him done. Because you know what? Here's the thing, and this came up at a couple of conversations recently. That's a beautiful, beautiful dream. No veterinarian is going to sedate a dog as if for surgery every 4 to 6 weeks to get that dog groomed. They don't have any magical way of doing this dog any differently than sedating him the way they would for you. There's no magic pill except for let's try to help this dog be good for it. That's the magic. Dog training. Think about what's going on in their little heads, because we don't groom stuffed animals. Well, some of us groom the model dogs, but that's not how we make our living most of the time. We're grooming a living being, and we should be spending some time thinking about what makes them tick. And that's to our benefit. That's not a waste of time. That's a perfect use of our time, is to figure out what makes them tick. So let's get away from the old school thinking that we're just going to push them through it, because I told you, I've been there, I've done it, and it doesn't necessarily work. It is not the fast track. In many, many ways, it wastes our time, and it's a higher risk of injury. Injury to the dog, injury to us, equipment gets broken, all sorts of crazy things happen when we keep pushing dogs past what they can handle. And let's let go of the idea that we're doing it because we're old school. Because we don't need to be old school. We can keep some of that old school, and we can build on it and add on it and refresh those ideas and challenge some of those assumptions. I made a course for you. Would you like to become a Master Groomer Behavior Specialist? The course is through Whole Pet Grooming Academy. It will be online content and live video chats. Class sizes are going to be very small so that I can work with you individually and that we can learn a lot together. And the first class is starting in October. So contact me, Chrissy, at happycritters.net, or contact the school, wholepetnh.com, to find out more. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. Another thing about the old school mindset that I think we really need to look at in the grooming industry and in the veterinary industry and in the dog training world is that it can come off as really ageist. And what I mean by that is it kind of implies that if you haven't been doing XYZ for decades, maybe you don't have anything to contribute. But the fact of the matter is that someone who is brand new can teach somebody something new. And we need to keep our minds open to that. Now, certainly experience means a lot, but what if you've been doing things in a way that isn't particularly good for years and years and years? What if you've been doing things the hard way for years and years and years? Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've been doing it for a long time, therefore you must be good at it. And the idea that someone brand new might be told, well, I'm old school. And I get it too. And I think I notice it more because when people talk to me, they very rarely guess my age. So I've been old-timered by people who've been in the industry as long as I have. And I usually don't play the old-timer game, but once in a while I will get involved and go, oh, really? How long you been grooming? Oh, whoops, because I've been grooming longer. It shouldn't matter how long someone has been doing it. What should matter is we should be listening to what are you telling me, and can you tell me how it plays out, and why this might work better. Now, here are some examples of old school things that I had to challenge myself to change. One, the very first of the old school things I would have to say is when I was told maybe we shouldn't be doing anal glands. And I was like, what? That's crazy. We always do anal glands. Everyone knows that some of these little dogs need to have their anal glands done. And I had to challenge that. Now, I didn't just stop doing anal glands because somebody said it. I talked to my veterinarian. I talked to other groomers. I listened to both sides. And then I really started thinking about it. And I know there are plenty of groomers who still do anal glands. And I know there are some groomers who do anal glands only if the veterinarian has asked them to do the anal glands on that particular dog, right? But I had to challenge that. And so I did. And I rarely ever do anal glands at this point. It would require the vet saying, please check those every time you groom also. Here's another one that I had to challenge for myself. Because here's another really common one, and some of these are hotly debated in the grooming industry. But here's another one, ear plucking. Yeah, I had to challenge myself on that. Like, what? Everybody knows you need to get the hair out of their ears so that they can dry and they can have air circulation. But then a veterinarian suggested that maybe we're causing more harm than good. And I had to think about it. Are we causing more harm than good? I think it's time for me to talk to my own veterinarian about it. Because luckily I have a vet that I can bounce things like that off of. And so I really had to think about it. And again, that's hotly debated in the grooming industry. Do we pluck ears or not? Here are some examples from the training world. When I first started training dogs, which was that first summer in 1986, because I stayed for training lessons in the evening, and on my lunch breaks I was watching the groomers, and I was so enthralled by all of it. So, but that was with choke collars. I don't use choke collars anymore, but I remember first hearing about, let's forget about the choke collar and let's start teaching dogs in a different way. And I was like, what? Choke collars aren't mean. We're not using them mean. And it's true, we weren't using them to be mean. But you know what? I had to think about it. Is there a better way? What kind of results do I get when I do it a different way? And I like the results better when I'm using things like positive reinforcement. I used to use prong collars. I used to believe in dominance theories. So you think about all of those things over time, someone's at some point will suggest, hey, maybe there's a different way to do it. And you don't have to just jump in right away and say, great, let's do it the new way. But to think about it for a minute. You know, like, all right, am I just clinging to old school because it's what I was taught? Is this something I should maybe look into more? Is this something that can help me do a better job? Is this something that benefits me or benefits the animals? Now here's another example because, like I said, people don't usually guess my age very well when I'm talking or hanging out with people, and sometimes groomers who haven't been in this as long as I have try to old-timer me. When I first started that summer with the brushing and bathing and working in the kennel, we also didn't have a high velocity dryer yet. That was a new tool that showed up a couple years later. They might have been somewhere, but we didn't have one. I never heard of one until I had been working with dogs for a couple years. And at first it was like, my God, what kind of a maniac would do something like that to a dog? And that's a tool that is such a standard tool now. High velocity dryers, my God, you know, we use them on everything. So think about what we did before we had the high velocity dryer. Here's an example. A German Shepherd, that kind of coat, we would try to get that dog to, first of all, squeeze them out in the bathtub and try to get them to shake. So you'd hold up a towel, blow in the dog's ear, try to get him to shake off as much of that water as you could. And then you'd put him into a crate with a stand dryer on them and cage dry them for a while. And then if they weren't entirely dry, you would put them on the table and use a stand dryer to dry a German Shepherd. A German Shepherd or a Husky, coats like that could take you all day. All day. So that high velocity dryer came out and we're like, this is madness. And then we started trying it on with some stuff and we're like, oh, this is the good kind of madness. I kind of like this thing. Here's another example. I remember my first set of snap-on combs when those were new. It's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, really, you should just hand scissor that, like a 1-inch snap-on comb. It would never look right. It would never look the same. I'm like, but I can set the length and then just neaten with the scissors. It'll never look the same. It'll never look right. But I think we all know at this point that it does, because snap-on combs have their place. These are an excellent tool that can save us a lot of time. And then we can go back and do more fine work and neaten things up at the end. But snap-on combs are not a cheat any more than high-velocity dryers were cheating. Yet, like I said, I still hear people talking old school. Old school. So when I got a clipper vac, there are still people who are like, oh, nope, I'm old school. You don't use things like that. They can't save you time. Oh, but it does. That thing is great. And my newest toy, which is the automatic dog brush. Great for dematting doodles. The automatic dog brush. Thing's great. Why do we refuse to listen to some new techniques, new tools? I think it's because we have this idea that whatever we were taught was absolutely correct. And it was correct for what we had available to us at that time. So behavior tools, I want you to think about that as tools in your toolbox. The idea of helping a dog be calm, comfortable, and cooperative is part of helping them learn to be good for grooming. And it's not something many of us were taught. It's not the old school mindset. I'd like for it to become a commonplace mindset. We help them be good for it. Because in my experience since I switched, because I have done all the mistakes, guys, I've been in this for a long time. I have made all of the mistakes. I continue to make mistakes. I am not a perfect person at all. But when I've made those mistakes and pushed a dog past what they could handle, and then learned about some new training technique or some new way of doing something and see an improvement, that's what I want to pass on. I don't want people to have to learn it on their own. So let's help dogs be calm so that they can relax, so that they can listen to us. Let's help them be comfortable with the things that we need to do before we worry about getting trims perfect. And let's teach them to be cooperative, because then we can have dogs that are going to be easy for us to groom for their entire lifetime. Because from my point of view, as someone who has done both, who's pushed dogs past what they can handle over and over and over again, and has had a dog for its entire lifetime fight me for grooming, now I look back and I can think of specific dogs that I think, oh my God, what was I doing? I could have made this all easier. And I have to let that go. I have some guilt about that. I have to let it go. Yep, I could have taught that dog that this was safe. I could have taught that dog that the whole thing is safe, everything's fine, and we could have had pleasant groomings every time I saw them. I didn't know. But now that I do know, I want to cry it from the mountains. I want you guys to be in on this. Like, oh wait, we can teach these dogs to be good. And we don't have to let go of this legacy of who taught us to do stuff. Okay? I understand why we want to be old school. I understand that. However, we can also implement new tools, we can implement new procedures, and we can build on the foundations that we were originally taught. And teaching dogs to be good for grooming is definitely the fast track. And it involves professional handling skills. I honestly, at this point, see dogs being pushed through grooming, and I can't believe it still happens, because I've known for 20 years that that's not particularly good. That's not the way to teach them to be comfortable with it. And so I've been trying to tell all of my colleagues, we can do a different way. We can do better. So think about what you consider to be old school. Think about what you have learned from people in the past, and just be ready to try to question that and analyze it and say, what can I keep and what can I build on? I don't even want you to get rid of things. I just want you to build on them. What can I build on? And then you might find that there are things that you're like, like I never thought to get rid of choke collars. I just haven't used one. Like those choke collars, I haven't used one in years. I haven't suggested to an owner to put a prong collar on a dog in decades. Not because I decided I needed to stop using that tool, but because I replaced it and built on it, and it's a tool that now collects dust. So when we talk about being old school, I think that sometimes we shut ourselves off from the newer information coming out. Newer techniques, newer information, newer tools, and instead, let's just analyze what's out there. So anytime someone comes to me and says, well, I was taught old school, I want them to tell me what it is they like about that and what they would like to learn more about, and then just try to inspire people to learn new ways of doing things. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.
If you're ready to go beyond the podcast, and I hope you do, I've made it really easy for you. If you go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step, you'll see all of the options. There's the Scholar Lounge community, there's the Modern Grooming Professional certification, there's Master Canine Stylist and Professional Canine Stylist diploma testings, there's the Behavior Lab for coaching and private one-on-one sessions with me, and of course the Master Groomer Behavior Specialist program. So go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step.